guys hear me okay? طيب. We're good to go, Jamal? Okay. يلا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلوات والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. Bit of a learning experience, I think, for all of us, for those that were here for the whole time. I think it's important to discuss in terms of the fiqh aspects of what actually is correct, because I think there's a lot of misinformation or perhaps even apocryphal information that needs to be corrected. First and foremost, nobody should be allowed to call the adhan or the iqama if the masjid already has a deputized mu'adhin. So for someone to take it upon themselves to initiate the iqama without the permission of the one who has been appointed to make the adhan and iqama is not allowed. Number two is that no one is allowed to call the iqama until the imam is standing in front. Okay, the iqama is usually what happens is people call the iqama and then they look around to see which one's going to lead them in salah. And this is incorrect. The issue should be the imam is the one who gives the person calling the iqama permission. He tells him, now you can call the prayer into the iqama. Secondly, the Prophet ﷺ said, help your brother if he is the oppressor or the oppressed. And the gentleman unfortunately got a little bit upset, and he started to call another brother names, and he started to call myself names and things like that. So it was important to defend the person that was there. You should never be silent when somebody's honor is being attacked. And we know that from the 5 principal, what we call the maqasid of the Sharia, the 5 main objectives or goals of the Sharia, one of them is the protection of honor. Right? The protection of honor, and that includes, people being talked about maliciously and slander and things like that. So, and then anyways, so long story short is that, and that's why, and the whole point of this is that's why it's very, very important to have knowledge. Okay? Because if you don't have knowledge, Ali radiallahu anhu said that there are 3 types of people. Okay? The one who knows, the one who has knowledge and knows that he has knowledge. And then there's the one who doesn't have knowledge and knows that he doesn't have knowledge. And then there's the person who doesn't have knowledge and doesn't know that he doesn't have knowledge. And that person is the most dangerous person. Right? It's called jahal murakkab. It's compounded ignorance. Not only do you not know, you don't even know that you don't know. And that person is the most dangerous. So the point that I'm trying to make is that make sure that you know before you open your mouth. And this is myself included. Right? Like I said, a lot of times information is one-sided, or a lot of times the information is just plain wrong, even though it's common. So it's very, very important to know before you speak. Okay? To know before you speak. طيب, moving on, inshallah, bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Getting back to our topic today, inshallah. We said that we were going to be covering the explanation of which chapter of the Quran. Does anybody remember? Anybody? Okay, Very good. Very good. So which chapter are we on now? Huh? 46? Almost. 49. Okay, chapter 49. Very good. Okay, and just to kind of recap everything that's on the board, I believe is should be a recap of what we covered last week. If not, then I'll go through it right now. We said that the naming of chapters of the Quran comes from a lot of different ways. Sometimes the Prophet ﷺ gave the surah its name, right? So we know that the surah Al-Fatiha was a name given by the Prophet ﷺ to this particular chapter of the Quran. Okay? And we know that sometimes the companions would give names to these chapters based off of either a prevalent theme that was in this chapter, B, by one of the first couple words that you find in the chapter. For example, Taha, Yasin. For example, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu awfu bil uqud. O you who believe, fulfill your promises. So some scholars have said this is the chapter of promises, just based off of one of the first words in the chapter. And then number 3 was that some scholars will name chapters, or some companions would name chapters based off of a common theme that might be found in this chapter. Okay, for example, the story of Maryam. Okay, the chapter of Ali Imran, the family of Imran. All right, so these are entire chapters that were called by the main theme or central story of this chapter. And then you have also number 4, sometimes chapters were given names according to a unique word that occurred in this chapter. Okay? For example, this chapter, chapter 49, Surah Al-Hujurat. Okay? The word Hujurat means small rooms, okay? Referring to the home of the Prophet ﷺ. And as a result, this word Hujurat appears only once in the entire Quran. It doesn't appear anywhere else in the Quran. And because that word is unique to that chapter, it got the name of that chapter. Okay? So the name Hujurat appears in the 49th chapter. It only appears in the 49th chapter, so they named it the title of the 49th chapter. And lastly, another way that scholars will name chapters of the Quran is according to a portion of a story that occurs in this chapter and doesn't occur anywhere else. Okay, so it's not so much vocabulary, it's not so much an idea, it's a story that occurs in this chapter that doesn't occur anywhere else. For example, the longest chapter in the Quran, the cow, okay, Al-Baqarah. The reason that it's called Al-Baqarah is because we have the story of Moses and the cow, or in biblical tradition, the golden calf, right? So that story appears more at length in this chapter than it does anywhere else. Also, stories like, what was the other one I was going to mention? SubhanAllah, it was off the top, I just lost it. The point is that there are many, many different ways that the scholars will name chapters, okay? Some of them from the Prophet ﷺ and some of them from the other things that I mentioned, okay? I mentioned also last time that this particular chapter of the Quran was revealed during the 9th year after the Hijrah, only about a year and a half after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. I also mentioned that chapters in the Quran are categorized predominantly into 2 main categories, okay? What are called Meccan chapters and Madani chapters. And we said that this nomenclature tells us not the location of the revelation, but the time of revelation. Okay? So when we hear Meccan chapter, it means that it was revealed before the migration. And when we hear Madani chapter, it means that it was revealed after the migration. Okay? Now, why is this important to understand? Because I can have a Madani chapter, but it was revealed physically in Mecca, and that has happened. Okay? Or I can have a chapter that's Madani, but it was revealed in between Mecca and Medina. It wasn't revealed specifically in Medina. Okay? So don't understand Mecca and Madani to mean location of revelation. Understand it to be the time of location, before the migration or after the migration. So this particular chapter was revealed 9 years after the migration, making it what type of chapter, Sister Pauline? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. MashaAllah. La. Anybody on this side? 9 years after the Hijrah would make this chapter what type of chapter? Huh? Madani. Very good. Madani, right? Revealed after the migration. Madani. Revealed before the migration. Makki. Meccan, right? Very easy. Okay? Yes, sir. Sure. So what is, just to recapitulate, what is the migration? Well, the migration was the movement of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, from Mecca to Medina. Mecca was the birthplace of the Prophet, and unfortunately, after 13 years of staying in Mecca, he was pushed to a point where it was no longer safe for him to remain there. There had been, after ridicule and scorn and harm, eventually it escalated to physical harm, and then eventually it escalated even further to an attack on his, or an attempt, I should say, on his life. So at that moment, Allah gave him permission to migrate, and he migrated to Medina. There's a lot more context to that. I don't want to get into all of that necessarily, but just so you have an idea, that point in the migration is what we base our calendar off of today. Okay, so right now we are in the year 1440. Okay, so we are essentially 1440 years removed from this migration. Does that make sense? Okay. Madani chapters. Okay. One of the sisters over here. What is a Madani chapter again? Revealed when? Huh? What about it? After the migration, okay? Chapters revealed before the migration, chapters revealed after the migration, they usually have common themes, okay? Verses or chapters that were revealed before the migration usually have very short verses, okay? Usually deal with the concept of God, usually deal with the concept of paradise and hellfire, usually deal with the concept of telling us stories of the previous nations. Okay, so all of these are common themes that we find in chapters that are pre-migration. When it comes to themes common to verses after migration, we see that one of the main themes is laws. Okay, laws. This is permissible, this is impermissible, etc., etc. Number two, like this particular verse, social interactions. Okay, how to deal with your brother, how to deal with your sister, how to deal with the people around you. Okay, more community-focused verses. Okay, whereas the previous Meccan verses were more focused on spirituality, okay, kind of ingraining that understanding of God, the understanding of the next life, the understanding of the concept of God and what it means to worship God. And then after the migration, it became the focus of the Quran shifted towards building a community. What does it mean to live in a Muslim community? What are the laws that are that pertain to a Muslim community? So all of that information was revealed after the migration. Okay. This particular chapter, as I mentioned, was revealed year 9 after the migration. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, died year 11. Okay, year 11. So only about a year and a half or so before the Prophet's death. Okay. This particular, and one thing that you should know as a tangent, and I love tangents if you haven't noticed by now, but I think they're very, very important because learning we should always try to find connections with the things that we learn, right? It shouldn't always be just kind of compartmentalize all of the knowledge, but it's important to see how this knowledge connects. When it comes to the seerah, the biography of the Prophet, the story of his life, the history of his life, scholars usually will the Prophet was, I guess, for a lack of better terms, a normal man from the time he was born until the age of 40. Okay? And this part, those first 40 years of his life, have a particular, I should say, reference point to it. The scholars will say, okay, pre-prophethood. And they will discuss all of the events of his life pre-prophethood in one chapter, let's say. And then they'll say, okay, the beginning of Revelation in one chapter. And then they'll say, okay, the early call to Islam, the third chapter. And so they will break up the 23 years of prophethood, okay, into different segments according to things that happened in this time period. So what happened particularly in the 9th year of the Hijrah, or after the migration, it's referred to as the year of the delegations. Okay? The 9th year of the Hijrah is known as the year of delegations. Why was that? Well, what happened the previous year? The previous year, the Prophet and his companions went back to Mecca and they conquered Mecca and they took it over. Okay? Mecca during that time was literally, as the name would indicate to you, the focal point, the center of the entire Arabian Peninsula. All roads lead to Rome, isn't that what the saying says? And so our Islamic twist on it, and which is also an actual idiom, believe it or not, is all roads go through Mecca as well. And that's exactly what was the case. All the trade caravans, all the people would always use Mecca as this central connection point. Okay? So when whatever Mecca said was considered the standard, Mecca was considered the most honorable of tribes, or the tribes in Mecca were considered the most honorable of tribes. Everybody feared Mecca because they had the most amount of power. Everything that you could imagine, Mecca had it. So when the Muslims took over Mecca, there was a seismic shift in the paradigm of who's in charge now. Okay? So all of the Arabs in the Arabian Peninsula, they saw, hey, the Meccans are in charge. I don't care who is in charge in Mecca, Mecca itself is in charge. Whether it's a non-Muslim or whether it's Muslim, they're the ones in charge. They're the ones that I need to pledge my allegiance to for my own safety. Okay? So all of these tribes, when they saw in the year before, in the 8th year, that the Muslims had taken over Mecca, in the 9th year, they traveled to Medina to pledge their allegiance to the Prophet. They said, hey, listen, we're tribe so-and-so from this place. You don't know us, but we're here. We want to pledge our allegiance to you. We want to make sure that we're on good terms. We don't want any problems with you. Okay? So that's what all of these different tribes did. So in the 9th year, all of these different tribes from all over the Arabian Peninsula came to Medina to pledge their allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As a result, the Prophet alaihi salatu wasalam interacted with many, many different tribes. And if you're familiar, if you've ever been to the country of America, people would say, sometimes tend to be a little bit less refined, right? There's always this concept of the city folk, right? The city slickers and the country folk, right? Country folk tend to be a little bit rougher around the edges, perhaps, as far as the generalizations go. And so the nomads and the Bedouins of Arabia were no different. Okay, they didn't have the refinement or the culture that the city dwellers did, especially the city dwellers of Mecca. So in one particular occasion, and this is tying this in now, in one particular occasion, the tribe of Banu Tamim, okay, the tribe of Banu Tamim, came to Medina to pledge their allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As the tribe was approaching, two companions of the Prophet, Abu Bakr and Umar, decided that they were figuring out who should be the one to go and greet these people from Banu Tamim. Because the Prophet, it wasn't logistically feasible for the Prophet to go out and meet every single tribe that arrived. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ would choose a person who he thought was the most capable of interacting with this particular tribe and go out and meet with that tribe. A lot of times people had prior encounters with that tribe, and they had good relations with that tribe, right? If I told you, hey, I know this particular community very well, and they're coming to visit the masjid, let me be the one to guide them, to do the tour, to welcome them, etc. Of course, you would say, what? Yeah, that's great. You already have that connection. Same idea. So Abu Bakr and Umar were thinking, and Abu Bakr said, I think such and such a person should go. And then Umar said, no, I think such and such a person should go. And then Abu Bakr responded to Umar and he said, the only reason you suggested this individual was to go against what I said, to just be against me, no other reason. And Umar started to say, well, no, that's not true, this and that. And actually an argument broke out between the two of them. Not only did an argument break out between the two of them, their voices started to become very, very elevated in the presence of the Prophet himself, to the point where the Prophet was trying to speak over them and nobody could hear him because the argument was so loud. As a result, the very first verse of this chapter was revealed in response to what happened between Abu Bakr and Umar. Consequently, immediately following this incident between Abu Bakr and Umar, some of the tribesmen from Banu Tamim came to the houses of the Prophet ﷺ, and as I mentioned, country folk and Bedouins do, what do? They went up to his house and they started to shout, Muhammad, come outside, we want to talk to you. Imagine being at your house, right, and some dude is standing in the middle of the street saying, Muhammad, come outside, I want to talk to you. You would be so embarrassed, right? You would think my neighbors are going to call the police, right? You're going to say, my neighbors already think I'm crazy because I do what I do, and now this other crazy person is calling me in front of my house. Same exact situation, right? So, the houses of the Prophet ﷺ were not your typical 2-story, 3,000 square foot house. The house of the Prophet ﷺ, and I think I mentioned this last week, one of the predecessors or one of the students of the companion said, I walked into the house of the Prophet ﷺ, and when I put my hand up, I could touch the ceiling, and when I would lean to my left, I could touch one wall, and when I would lean to the right, I could touch the other wall. That was the size of the house. Would you call that a house? You would probably call that what? A room, right? And that's why the houses of the Prophet were not called buyut, houses. They were called Hujurat, rooms. And that's why this chapter is called Hujurat. Because of the Bedouins who were shouting to the Prophet from behind his houses. Okay? So that's one of the themes that we're going to be talking about in this particular chapter. Now, before we get into the explanation of the first verse, it's very important to understand what the goals of this chapter are. What do we as students of the explanation of the Quran hope to achieve through the study of this particular chapter? Does that make sense? Okay. Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi, Fakhruddin al-Razi, the very last bullet point, if you can see it, was a scholar of tafsir, a scholar of explaining the Quran. And he was known for, he had, let's call it a dubious distinction. His tafsir was unique in the sense that he would pull from everything to explain the Quran. He would pull from medicine. He would pull from astronomy. He would pull from philosophy. He would pull from all of these different sciences to explain the Quran. So some of the scholars have said, everything in the tafsir of Razi is present except for tafsir. Because he would talk so much about other things that he never talked about the actual verses themselves. But he does make a beautiful point here. And Imam al-Ghazali, another scholar, also mentions this particular idea. So I want to bring it up because it's very, very important. This chapter is 18 verses in length. 18 verses. If you were open to the Quran, it would be approximately 2 1/3 pages long. 18 verses. There's one particular phrase that is repeated 5 times in this chapter. And that phrase is, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. O you who believe. Okay? This particular phrase, O you who believe, is repeated 5 times in this chapter. Okay? Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi says that behind each one of these 5 times is a different lesson that Allah wants to teach us. Behind each one of these 5 mentionings of, O you who believe, Allah is teaching us a new theme or a new idea. And He says they can be summed up in the following 5 points. Number 1, the first lesson that Allah wants to teach us is how to interact with Allah. Okay? This entire chapter of the Quran is all about interactions. Okay? It's all about teaching us how to interact. And there's 5 basic interactions that the chapter is teaching us. 5 basic, O you who believe. Each one of them is an interaction that Allah wants to teach us about. Number 1, an interaction with Allah. How do we interact with Allah? Number 2, how to interact with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 3, how do we interact with people who sin openly? How do we interact with people that are hypocrites? How do we interact with people as particularly fusaq, people who sin in public with complete disregard for their religion? They're Muslims. Okay, they're Muslims. We're not saying they're not Muslims. They're Muslims, but they do sins in the open without shame. That's number 3. Number 4, how do we deal with our Muslim brothers and sisters when we are in their presence? How do we deal with them when we are around them, when we're speaking to them, when we're hanging out with them? How do we interact with them? And number 5, the 5th thing is, how do we interact with those same believers when they're absent, when they're no longer with us? I have a conversation with Ahmed. Ahmed leaves. What is my duty as a Muslim to Ahmed when he is no longer present next to me? How do I interact with him in his absence? These are the 5 interactions that this chapter will discuss. Does that make sense? Sure. Number 1, interaction with Allah. Number 2, interaction with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 3, interaction with people who are Muslim but open sinners. People who sin out in the open. Number 4, how do we interact with Muslim brothers and sisters that are in our company? When we are with them, when we are interacting with them, how do we deal with them? And number 5, how do we deal with those same Muslim brothers and sisters once they leave? Once they are no longer with us. Okay? Jamal, do you have a particular translation of the Quran that you recommend to them? Okay. So, and I concur with his recommendation. I would highly recommend, if you do not have a translation of the Quran, or if you do have one, make sure that it's this one. It's very, very good. The English flows very, very nicely. It's not archaic, old English. It's very, very, reads very fluidly. It's part of your new Muslim kit. It's that one on the end, right there, in the blue one. Okay, it's the blue one. We're gonna burn that one afterwards. I'm just joking. So the one that the sister had in blue was by I'll type it on here if you want, up here. Mass Abdel Halim. Okay, that is the translation that I highly recommend. If you are looking for one in Spanish, I would recommend the translation by Isa Garcia. Okay? So Mas Abdul Halim in English, or Isa Garcia if you're looking for one in Spanish. I know Furqan Foundation is the one that publishes the Isa Garcia one if you're looking for copies of those. It looks just like that one. The one that you have, sister? Yeah, it looks just like that one, but it's in Spanish. You have it too? Okay, perfect. Great, great. So Brother Jamal can, you speak with him if you need to get a copy, inshallah. So I would recommend, if you have that book, to bring it with you, inshallah. It would be good to read along with the translation, inshallah, of the following verses. Okay? Any questions with regards to the introduction of the chapter before we get started with the actual verse? No? Everything's crystal clear? Alhamdulillah. I must be an excellent teacher then, if that's the case. Okay. We are, I think, out of time. I want to leave time also for open question and answer if anybody has questions not necessarily related to... We have 10 minutes? Yeah? Okay. Very quickly then, let's just get into it real quick. This is verse number 1. Okay. This is the first verse in the chapter that begins with Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, O you who believe. Okay. And the verse says, O believers, do not be hasty and forward in Allah and His Messenger's presence. Okay. This is referring to the argument that happened between Abu Bakr and Umar. Why? Because they were trying to make a decision before the Prophet made his decision about who to send. Okay, so this is a reference to that. But what does Allah say instead? Fear Allah. Be cognizant of Allah. The verse in Arabic says, have taqwa of Allah. Okay. Are you guys familiar with the term taqwa? Huh? God consciousness? Okay. There's a beautiful line of poetry in Arabic, and I'll translate it obviously, that deals with the concept of taqwa. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, one of the companions of the Prophet, he said, he was once asked, please describe to me your understanding of taqwa. What does it mean to have taqwa to you? How do you understand it? So Abu Hurairah said, he asked him a question. He said, have you ever walked in an area that was full of bushes and these bushes had a lot of thorns on them? Did you ever walk through an area like that? And the man said, yes, of course I have. And I think we all can at least imagine what, if we haven't done it ourselves, at least imagine it. So it's like, yeah, I've done that. So Abu Hurairah said, well, how did you walk through it? What did you do? So the man said, well, I took my garments and I brought them close to me, and as I was walking, I was careful where I was walking to make sure that I didn't get too close or step on anything that had thorns in it. And Abu Hurairah said, that is taqwa. Said, that exactly right there, that's taqwa. To mind your step, to be careful of where you're walking, to make sure that you don't get too close to the prohibitions of Allah, to always be mindful of your surroundings. So the famous verse of poetry is one that was written by I believe, an Abbasid poet. He said, خَلِّ الذُّنُوبَ صَغِيرَهَا وَكَبِيرَهَا فَهُوَ التُّقَى وَاصْنَعْ كَمَاشٍ فَوْقَ أَرْضِ الشَّوْكِ يَحْذُرُ مَا يَرَى لَا تَحْقِرَنَّ صَغِيرَةً فَإِنَّ الْجِبَالَ مِنَ الْحَصَى. The poet said, he said, leave sins, big ones and small ones. This is taqwa. And do like the person who walks through a land that is filled with thorns. He's quoting Abu Hurairah now. Okay? He said, walk through that area. Be like the person that walks through a thorny area. يَحْذُرُ مَا يَرَى. He is cognizant, he is aware of what he sees. Okay? يَحْذُرُ مَا يَرَى. Hold on. لا تحقرن صغيرة. Do not belittle even a minor sin, because indeed mountains are made from small pebbles. Does that make sense? So we think that it's just a minor sin. It's just one little thing. It's just one little thing, right? But what happens when you take these little stones and you start to accumulate them in the same spot? Exactly. And that what was once a small little pile of pebbles is now this huge mountain before you even realized it. Right? Shaitan is not the type of individual that will lead you to go from A to Z in one shot. He will not tell you to go out and drink. He will not tell you to go out and fornicate. He will not tell you to go out and do these things directly, because he knows if he were to tell you to do that, you would be completely resistant. But what does he do instead? He'll say, it's okay to talk to her. It's okay to go out to lunch with her. It's okay to invite her over. It's okay to go to the movies with her. It's okay to do that. And slowly but surely, step by step, the roads start to diverge. And before you realize it, you're so far from the path, you're thinking, how did I get this far? Had he taken you from here to here in one shot, you would have been surprised. But slow and steady wins the race, right? And that's what his plan is the entire time. So what the Abu Hurairah and subsequently the poet are trying to tell you is, be mindful of even the small ones, because the small ones will accumulate. Okay? So Allah says in this verse, have taqwa. Why? Because Allah is all hearing and all knowing. Okay? So whenever Allah uses the phrase, "O you who believe," okay, it is a way of getting our attention. Okay? For example, if I'm having a conversation with Jamal, okay, and we're talking about, let's say, sports or something, okay, and all of a sudden, I say to him, Jamal, and then I tell him a piece of information, what do you think I'm trying to do? What am I trying to do by that? By calling his name? I'm trying to get his attention. I'm trying to get him to pay attention, because what? He might have been listening, but everything might have just kind of been mixing together. But now that I'm about to tell him something important, I want to make sure that he's listening. So Allah is saying, "Oh, you who believe, hey, listen up. This is for you. This is important. Pay attention. What is it?" And then He gives you the instruction after that. This occurs 5 times in this chapter. 5 important things. Those 5 interactions that I was talking about earlier. Okay? Which are listed here, if you haven't written them down. Okay? Allah then says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tuqaddimu bayna yaday Allahi wa rasulih." Do not put yourself in front of. Do not go ahead of Allah and His Messenger. We understand that as a concept, or based off of the context of what I mentioned, to be what? To make a decision, perhaps, before the Prophet himself made a decision. Yes? Does that make sense? What is meant here, I want you to visualize something with me for a second. I want you to visualize that we are walking on a path with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all of the believers. We're walking on a path. Okay? And then I want you to picture that one of us runs ahead of the pack. He runs ahead of the group on the same path, but he runs ahead of them. What would your understanding of that be? Right? He is not waiting for instructions from the Prophet to say, hey, make a right, make a left, stay on this path, etc. He is going ahead of Allah and His Messenger. So visually, what the verse is trying to tell us is, not only don't be hasty, not only don't make decisions before you find out what the ruling is, stay with the group. Don't get ahead of the group. Oh, there is barakah, there is blessing in remaining with the group, and there is danger, I guess we could say, when a person deviates from the group. Why do you think they have the phrase circling the wagons? Have you heard of the phrase circling the wagons? Nobody? You've never heard of the phrase circle the wagons? No? Okay. Nobody? Wow. Okay. I'm just really white, I guess. I don't know. Circling the wagons means that you bring all your resources together, okay, and you kind of, everybody gets on the same page, okay? Visualize this back in the 1800s, because this is exactly what they used to do, right? When they would stay for the night as they were traveling across America in a caravan, they would take the wagons and they would put them in a circle. And they would have the fire in the middle, and all of the animals and the people, everybody would socialize within the circle of the wagons, and the wagons on the outside would provide some type of protection. Right? There's protection in numbers. Right? So what Allah is trying to tell us here, don't leave the group. Stay with the group, because there's always going to be protection in numbers. Okay? Similarly, what the scholars have understood from this, and I'll make this as the last point, inshallah, it is not permissible for us to do something without first finding out what the ruling of that thing is. For example, okay, I want to get married, but I have no idea what the responsibilities of marriage are. I have no idea what my rights are with my wife. I have no idea what her rights are over me. I have no idea what the financial responsibilities are. All I know is that I want to get married. Does that make sense? Okay. What about a person who says, I want to open up a business, but I have no idea what it means to run a business. I have no idea what it means to hire employees and do payroll and all of these other, file taxes and all of that. I have no idea how to do that, but I'm just going to go and open a business. What would you say about that person? He's ignorant, and he's definitely destined to fail in that enterprise, right? So the fuqaha have said, the legal scholars have said, that it's not permissible for a person to undertake such a big and important enterprise without first knowing and understanding what the rulings of that enterprise are. It is not allowed for us to get married without finding out what the responsibilities are first. It's not allowed for us to open up a business without first learning the Islamic rulings on business practices and transactions. Okay, so all of this is very, very important to understand. Okay. Last but not least, we'll end here with sabab nuzul. Okay, and if you want to remind me, we'll continue with that, inshallah. Imam al-Ghazali, just to echo exactly what I had just said, he said, it is obligatory upon a person to know what the ruling is regarding an action prior to undertaking it. Okay? And it is not possible to know what that ruling is without consulting the messenger, i.e., do not put yourself in front of the messenger. Does that make sense? Okay. And why does the verse say, O you who believe, do not put yourselves in front of Allah and His messenger? Why does Allah mention Himself first as honor and respect? Right? Because our primary duty is always to Allah, and then our secondary duty is to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Remember how I said that this verse is one of 5 that tells us 5 interactions? Which one of the 5 interactions do you think it is? How to deal with the Prophet? Okay. Does anybody disagree? You would agree? You agree? Anybody disagree? This verse actually tells us how to deal with Allah. Anybody know how? Anybody want to guess how? Because it is not possible to know what Allah wants without knowing what the Prophet ﷺ said. So if you want to know what Allah wants, you want to interact with Allah, you want to establish that good rapport and etiquette and relationship with Allah, the only way to do that is to go through the messenger. And that's why the messenger's message mentioned in this verse. Do not put yourselves in front of Allah by not putting yourself in front of the messenger. When you put yourself in front of the messenger, you also put yourself in front of Allah. Does that make sense? Because there's no way of knowing what Allah wants except through the messenger. So if you bypass the messenger, you've bypassed Allah. Because there's no way that you would know otherwise. Does that make sense? Okay. Very good. So next month, inshallah, we will resume with what is called sabab nuzul, the reasons behind why this verse was revealed. We talked about one of them already. We'll talk about the second one next week, or next time, inshallah. Okay? Very good. Any questions for me? Either related to this chapter or to something else?
The one question, when the revelation was given to the Prophet, peace upon him,
Mhm.
was that like in front of his messengers right there on the spot? Or something?
So how the question was, when the Prophet would receive revelation, was it in private or was it done in public, things like that? So it was both. We have accounts where the Prophet received that very first revelation in a cave by himself, right? And then we have other instances where some of the companions actually described to us what they were witnessing when the Prophet would receive revelation. They said that one narration reports that the Prophet was riding on his camel as he received revelation. And as he was receiving revelation, he began to perspire. And he would perspire even if it was cold outside. He would begin to perspire. And the weight of the revelation was very, very heavy, to the point where the camel had to sit down because it could not take the weight of the revelation. Similarly, another companion said, the Prophet was leaning on me when the revelation came, and I felt his body weight increased tremendously as the revelation was coming down.
So revelation, it wasn't like a voice loud, in the skies. It was just more like internal, something that he'll
Okay, so his personal experience differs from what the people observed, right? So the people observed him as perspiring and becoming, heavy or stiff or whatever. But he himself said that revelation came in many different ways. He said that one form of revelation, he would hear revelation like you would hear the ringing of bells. He said, I would receive revelation in dreams. He said, I would receive revelation. Jibreel would come to me, the angel Gabriel would come to me in the form of a man and talk to me like you and I are talking right now. He said that sometimes Jibreel would come to me in his original form, and he would give me revelation like that. So there were different ways that he experienced the revelation. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Yes? Sure. The one who has knowledge, and so first of all, is a person who has knowledge and knows that he has knowledge. Okay? The second one is a person who doesn't have knowledge and knows that he doesn't have knowledge. And then the third person is a person who doesn't have knowledge and doesn't know that they don't have knowledge. And that is the most dangerous type of person. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? No, the most important one is the person who doesn't have knowledge and doesn't know that they don't have knowledge. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. So that person is slightly different only because the last category that I mentioned, he thinks he knows. He thinks he has the knowledge. He thinks he has the information. But in reality, he doesn't. And that's why he's dangerous. Yeah. Yeah, true. True. Yeah, true. Anything else, ladies? Yeah. Anything else? All right. Jazakallah khair.
All right. Thank you so much, Sheikh Jameel. Everybody, just give me a few minutes just for announcements. Thank you so much. On behalf of IOC, I sincerely just want to apologize to Sheikh Jameel for what happened outside before Dhuhr. Unfortunately, in our community, sometimes we have very, what's the best word to use? Yeah, you know, emotional, lack of knowledge type of individuals. We pray to Allah that Allah gives us all knowledge and beneficial knowledge that we can apply in our lives. So we sincerely apologize to you, Sheikh Jameel. He maintained great character, respect, courtesy. He gave us knowledge about the situation, which I thought was amazing. He kept his composure, right? And he educated the community, of course, outside in the prayer hall, and of course us here as well. So we want to thank you for that, and please accept our sincere apologies. Unfortunately, every mosque has something like this, and we try to do our best to educate our communities. But on that note, I was just kind of reflecting, and imagine how it is for us as maybe new Muslims or converts to Islam or recommitted Muslims. You know, the moment you step into the mosque, maybe for the first time, let's just give a hypothetical, you have like tattoos or something, or you have no headscarf, and somebody jumps on you. How does it feel? Right? It's not the best feeling at all, right? But you know, Sheikh Jameel is teaching us something very important. The Quran teaches us something very important, right? So we thank you for that. You know, may Allah bless you. So a few things. Number two, I want to thank you all for this past Friday. It was an amazing event called Diamonds in the Rough, Accepting Islam in Prison. We had a full house, around 200 people. We had food was catered by Taqwa Tacos. We sold out. It was just really amazing. A very emotional night. There's a lot of great discussions. People were crying. People were opening. It was just really nice. For those of you, if you didn't get a chance to, if you weren't able to come that night, Friday we streamed it live. So those of you, if you're streaming right now, you can catch it on our YouTube page. Just go to IIOC TV and just make sure you subscribe so you know about future events that are happening. But it was really nice. I just want to thank all the volunteers. We had like around 15, 20, if not more, volunteers that took time literally the whole day helping us out in the kitchen, outside, and so forth. So thank you so much for being part of the family, and those that had intention of helping. Always, one of the things we really encourage everyone to do is, no doubt, be connected to the mosque, but also try to do your best, if you're in a position to volunteer at whatever level or capacity that you can. And it's something very important for us, inshallah, God willing. Number three, based on the IOC or from the IOC Social Committee, we're having a seminar on marriage. Something very important. So if you are interested in that, it's going to be somewhere close to IIOC. I don't know the exact details yet, but the information will be out there. So if you are interested, you can go on our website, iioc.com/matrimony, and I think they have a sign-up sheet, so make sure you sign up. If you or anybody that you know are interested in getting married, I would highly encourage you to do that. And last, and of course, certainly not least, we're very honored that we have someone that had donated some clothes. So if you're in a position, or you know someone that's in a position of some clothes, some jackets, etc., they're in the back right there on the table. So please help yourself to that. And inshallah, with that, we'll go ahead and conclude. If you can just help me out with the tables and chairs, that'll be great. And a lot of food, so please make sure you package your food. And is that good? Okay. And that'll be all. Thank you so much. May Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. I almost forgot. We have a big, and it's right here too, right in front of me. Really quickly, we have there's a big event coming up. It's called Islamic Roots in Latino Culture. It's a big event coming up March 9th from 12 to 3 p.m. It's going to be at the Islamic Society of Corona, Norco, so the Corona Mosque. It's a very important event with Imam Isa Parada, and Brother Mujahid's coming as well? Oh, he's on the, I didn't see him on the floor. Oh, I should. Okay, nice. So Brother Mujahid himself, who's no stranger, he's actually sitting right here some time back. He's been here a number of times. And Brother Jalil as well, if I'm not mistaken. It's a big event. I encourage you all to attend. It's from 12 to 3 p.m. I think Sheikh Jameel is going to say, yeah, I'll have him say a few words as well, inshallah.
Sorry, very quickly, guys. If you have family members that speak only Spanish, this is an open mosque day in Spanish. Okay, it's entirely in Spanish. The presentations are in Spanish. The tours are in Spanish. Sister Marlene from Taqwa Tacos will also be there to provide food, inshallah. This is a great opportunity. I think if they're the only other center here that does an open mosque day in Spanish. So we're trying to fill that need for our growing community, inshallah. So if you do have family members, friends, colleagues, employees, whatever, that speak Spanish that would be interested in coming. It'll be March 9th, Saturday, at 12 o'clock at the Masjid in Corona. And if you have any questions, you can ask Brother Jamal or myself, and we can get you more details, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan.
Right, no more. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. We'll see you guys on Friday with Coffee with the Shaykh at 6:30, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.